What was the most unethical yet legal job that you've had? Phone psychic. I knew how to read tarot cards and decided to cash in on some sweet beginning pay of $8 an hour in '96. It sucked the life from me. When my headset rang, I'd get a code and page through a gigantic binder to find the corresponding script and information. Some people thought they were reaching a Christian prayer line, others were calling a lucky lotto line, and some thought we were Miss Cleo's personal assistants. We just did a tarot reading and tried to stretch out the call. The majority of my repeat callers were mentally ill or suffering from extreme loneliness. Lots of old folks. Technically, if someone said any one of a number of phrases like, "I'm going to take my own life," or "my spouse is violent," or "I think I have a substance problem," we were obligated to refer them to a toll-free number corresponding to their situation. In reality, doing that too often was grounds for termination. The whole point of my job was to max out the call at 30, 40, or 50 minutes, depending on the specific line it came in on. The calls cost from $2.99 to $4.99 per minute. Every month you'd have a review, and as soon as your numbers dropped, you'd be placed on probation or fired. If you kept improving, though, you could make serious bank. By the time I left, I was bringing in $18 an hour, again in '96. I got pretty good at cold reading, which is much more difficult in the absence of physical cues, and my numbers kept improving. I had callers that asked for me personally, and was offered a chance to subcontract from home, but my regulars were not mentally competent. They were either suffering from delusions and paranoia, or clearly slipping further into dementia. I stayed for the money, but one day I was speaking to a woman who had just been released from the hospital. Her boyfriend had beaten her with an aluminum baseball bat, bitten her in several places, and nearly tore her ear off. She wanted me to craft a love spell, and I broke character, repeatedly urging her to call the domestic violence hotline with free qualified help. When the call ended, I was chastised by my supervisor, who had been listening in. He threatened me with termination if I was caught again, and I was done. I told him to shove the whole headset all the way up his butt, and I walked out. $18 an hour in the '90s was a pretty decent wage, so walking out must not have been easy, OP. But good for you, because that sounds truly morally bankrupt. That would eat away at your brain for the whole time you worked there, and I'm sure it still kinda does. Story 2. Know a guy in California who captured skunks after high school for company, and was taught to humanely release them into wooded areas or along rivers that bordered residential areas. You know, just technically far enough away. Said he would often recapture and release the same skunks while rotating them through different affluent animal rights neighborhoods, with folks who'd pay to have them removed, because they would insist they not be ended. Supposedly, after each release, the surrounding pet stores got a pretty good spike in sales for anti-skunk scent shampoo from dog owners, too. Story 3. In high school, I was a lead out for a dog racing track in Wisconsin, like greyhound racing. It was awful. 1. Those dogs are not pets. They're vehicles for making money. Dog owners were generally jerks who owned 10 to 15. They're not trained. 2. Because of number 1, most of the dogs are nuts. They don't heel or walk, some of them crap all over themselves, some hate other dogs/humans, some are so scared you have to pull them from their cages, and yes, before the races they're kept in stainless steel boxes about 2 feet cubed. 3. The dogs do not want to race, in my opinion. We were taught how to grab their collar, then reach under their stomach to lift them off the ground and throw them into the boxes. They whine right up to the second the doors open at the start of the race. 4. They're drug tested immediately before each race, which means you walk them while a vet chases them around with a pee bottle. They're all tattooed with an ear tattoo number to mark them. They smell like pee, and there is pee everywhere. One time I was working and the idiot that controlled Wishbone, there's a dog toy on a metal pole that goes around the track in front of the dogs to get them to chase it. Well, the guy forgot to put the Wishbone brake on. There's a foot brake that, when pushed, slows Wishbone down and swings the metal pole in away from the track. He forgot, and the metal pole came to a stop. I'll never forget the sound of 8 greyhounds hitting a metal pole leg height at 40 miles per hour. Those dogs were broken. Legs broken, backs broken, destroyed. We were given a bonus for scooping up the dogs and getting them off the track before they died. I was a moron 17-year-old who was working because all my friends wanted to work at the cool new dog track. I quit shortly after. Screw anyone associated with the dog racing. I can't believe that crap is legal. Story 4. I used to buy, trade, and sell trading cards. It seemed unethical because you'd always be trying to get an amazing deal from people, and especially kids. If someone didn't know the price of the card, you'd still haggle with them to get it even lower. I remember one of my buddies getting 3 cards worth $150 each for about $30 because the guy didn't know the price. It spiked a couple hours ago. It was Yu-Gi-Oh, not Magic. Now, I'm not saying I know anything about this, but from friends of friends, I've heard that Pokemon cards are a lot better. Well, when it comes to people trying to lowball you at the very least. Scalping, however, is at an all-time high. People go into stores, buying all the boxes, and just immediately listing them on Facebook Marketplace or whatever for 3 times the value. Yeah, that sucks. But people generally don't scam kids, so that's good. Story 5. Enrollment counselor for University of Phoenix. I only did it for a short time until I could get a good performance review and get promoted to some other position, but it was downright dirty. I worked in the Axia College division, which was their associate's degree program. There were enrollment counselors, i.e. salespeople, who worked there for years because they could get up to a 20% pay raise every 6 months as long as they enrolled massive amounts of students. So my job was to convince poor saps who hated their dead-end job to take on $40,000 in student debts to get an AA degree which would not transfer to any other university except University of Phoenix. So now you're 40,000 in and realize that an AA degree in criminal justice really isn't going to get you a job. So there's a whole other division of enrollment counselors there to convince you to take on an additional $40,000 in loans to get your bachelor's degree. And even though they say they don't pay their employees on commission, if you don't enroll enough students each month, you can get pay cuts and disciplinary action at your reviews every 6 months. The ones that were successful were just dirty used car salesmen. Oh, you want to become a nurse? Here, let me sign you up for an AA program in healthcare administration. I once saw someone convince a student that they were going to be able to get a job in forensics, just like the TV show CSI, with their associate's degree in criminal justice. Don't get me wrong, some of their programs are decent at the master's level, but their undergraduate degrees are a joke. Sign on to your classroom, post some bullcrap in a discussion forum. Do that a couple times a week and get a degree. I had friends that worked there just to get a degree and never cracked a book ever. If you're skilled in bullcrap, you can get a bachelor's degree in like 18 months and never read a single book or academic article. Story 6. I once worked as a runner for a major UK television talent contest during initial auditions. The way that the APs, associate producers, referred to contestants and talk about them with each other was horrendous, like they were subhuman or not even people. I sat through and observed quite a lot of auditions with people who were very talented and passionate about what they did, but they were denied going through to the next round because they didn't have personality. My faith in humanity hit an all-time low while I was working there. Narrator's commentary. People are very misinformed about talent contests on TV. At the end of the day, it's a TV show first and talent contests second. If it doesn't make good TV, it's not going to make it on. And also the contracts those things rope you into are apparently horrendous, to the point where getting second or third sometimes is just better, all because you don't have to sign up with this specific agency that takes whatever cut or something. I'll be honest, I read this a while ago, I don't remember everything about it. But yeah, talent shows just are nothing. Story 7. I worked in a factory once through a temp agency. They manufactured fiberglass, like the stuff you find on the inside of paneling and car doors. It was hell. Extremely hard and dangerous work. There was a dust explosion in 2003 that maimed 30-something people and ended 7. There aren't any regulations on dust, so nothing was ever done about it. It exploded again a year or 2 ago. Eventually, I injured myself when I was pulling fiberglass off of a mold. When I went to the office to complete paperwork, I was looking around and noticed there was a whiteboard with a list of accidents that had occurred recently. It was bad. Lost digits, broken limbs, third-degree burns, etc. It was like the place that OSHA forgot. Story 8. I once worked for a guy that may have legitimately made software that he was paid by Microsoft to never release. He had me make some software mock-ups for a type of file manager. I mean, we had packaging, screenshots, and fake ads. He had me bring some friends, bring all of our computers to an office, and we got a network Doom game going. None of us could program or hack or do anything other than some simple graphics and scripts, but our day-to-day costumes looked like rejected ideas from the movie Hackers. We were to be background while he brought in several people in suits to review the product. There was no product, just the appearance there was. The guy paid us all in cash and disappeared. I assumed he knew the right people to take a check to not develop his vaporware further. Story 9. I wrote fake reviews for an Asian massage parlor website, like Yelp, but for extra services. They get around the legality of this kind of intimate work by calling it a fantasy site, but as far as I could tell, these places were legitimately giving happy endings. I quit after a few months because it made me feel like a skis and was soul crushingly boring writing variations of the same HJ 40 plus times a day, but I still can't look at Asian massage parlors with a straight face. Pay was decent though. Story 10. I was an environmentalist for one day. While that may sound noble, the job consisted of going door to door begging people for money. The first red flag was when I was told I was paid 25% of all donations, which didn't strike me as super odd, but during my training hours there were a few people who asked what percentage of their donations would go to helping out the cause. Flavor of the week was the Great Lakes, to which my trainer told them 95%. Now, I may not be a math major, but something didn't add up there. Either way, the job basically consisted of conning old ladies out of a few $100 a pop. One of the guys I was in the van with was happy some old lady gave him $1,000. The neighborhood we were in certainly didn't support that type of donation. In the end, it was basically just begging for money but only keeping 25% of it. However, the super liberal areas they would hit up would always have at least a few idiots who would hear the word nature or environment and have them shell out cash. My job application was writing a letter to a senator about issues I believed were important to me. In the end, screw them. Story 11. In my teens, I worked as a telemarketer for a company that solicited donations for charities, such as breast cancer awareness, wounded warriors, etc. We targeted a wide range of people, rich and poor. The company put us through training that taught us how to get people to donate their last dollars. It was really sick crap. I'd have people on the phone saying they're on a fixed income, SSI, disability. These were about 70% of our target demographic, and they can barely pay their mortgage or buy groceries. They taught us sales tactics that made people feel bad for not donating, even when it was the last few dollars they had to their name. When you called people living in higher income areas, calls usually went something like this. Hey client, we saw you donated X amount last month. Are you still comfortable with that this month? You know, we have a silver, gold, platinum, or whatever, members program for those who want to go a little above the minimum to help these suffering people. Surely you could spare just a bit more. We would always get a talking to if we didn't upsell people, even if they're saying they're underwater on their mortgage and are dead broke. Then we would send them a little sticker and a return envelope in the mail. We were paid hourly plus commission, but the way it was structured, it was incredibly difficult to tally up how much you earned. And people that hadn't been there for years rarely saw anything beyond the hourly check. It was basically obvious the boss was ripping us off. The worst part? The company only donated 1% of the proceeds to an actual charity. How do I know? The owner of the company freaking told us. He said it was going towards maintaining the building and equipment and paying employees. The building was run down, the computers old as crap, and 90% of the employees were hired and quit within a month. The boss would straight up brag about how when he started the business he would make calls himself, and now he, quote, drives a Cadillac and plays $100 hands of blackjack all night, as part of his motivational speeches. He was a real piece of crap. I was young and desperate for a job, but hell, I despised working there. That was by far the most unethical job I've not only worked at, but even heard of. Now I never donate money to anything unless I can literally see where my money is going. I'll gladly donate my time, I'll buy a bum a sandwich, but I do not believe in charities. I'm now a mortgage banker, so the sales experience helped, but I really regret ever working there. Story 12. I worked for an ambulance chasing a lawyer. We had someone get the accident reports, and then I had to call the person not at fault and convince them to see our doctors, who would say they're really injured and need regular therapy. Then I have them sue the other driver's insurance companies. Part of my pitch was that this injury could get them $50,000 to $100,000 for pain and suffering. Most people, though, barely got anything. We got a commission from the doctors for sending them patients, usually $1,000 per, and I got $100 cash for each person I got. I was 19 and making almost $200 an hour on average. My boss got put in jail for drugs and sleeping with his 15-year-old stepdaughter's friends. Well, that last sentence really drove home the morals of this guy, huh? $200 an hour is very appealing. And also, I kinda think that OP isn't the problem. Hear me out. I feel like the structure around all of this is much more to blame than the people taking advantage of it. Am I Canadian complaining about privatized healthcare again? Perhaps. But it really does directly lead to this kind of stuff. In any system, people will find a way to abuse it. You can't stop everyone, and as such, stuff like this happens, which just ends up sucking for a lot of people involved. Story 13. Some really specialized software for government agencies. My role was as the PM. I'd been there for 7 weeks when I was asked to provide an update to the client, a government entity. When I showed the bosses the status was 20% complete and we were having significant issues, they got irate and told me to change it to 80% and to gloss over the issues I presented. I resigned and didn't give the presentation. After the bosses fixed the presentation and presented it to the client canceled part of the scope of work, but they were thrilled that our company didn't have the issue with the software that all the other suppliers had, and wanted our company to show them what we did to get it to work. I found this out because 3 people who were present in the meeting knew why I had quit, and each one wanted to call me and tell me the crap storm the bosses had started. Story 14. I used to work at my university's administration office. Laziest and most incompetent people I have ever seen. I was a part-timer, but I often ended up alone in the office because they just wouldn't show up. One year the point system changed. We basically needed a certain number of points or credits to graduate each semester. They didn't understand anything and didn't bother, and about 2 weeks before the end of the first semester, they realized that they made a mistake and our class was basically short 2 points. They immediately blamed the students and told us we would have to take an extra curriculum completely irrelevant to our major. Again, 2 weeks before the end. I called their bullcrap right away, and my former colleague offered me to falsify my scores in the system if I kept it a secret that they messed up so bad. Told her that if she did it for me, she would need to do it for all. Eventually, they did. Story 15. I worked in fast food. It's called Hungry Jack's here, known as Burger King everywhere else. People would go through the drive-thru asking about the healthy options. I normally did the spiel of, our healthy chicken baguettes, only 9 grams of fat. However, I was feeling rather disenchanted, so felt like being honest for a change. One day I responded with, depends on what you call healthy. I explained that the chicken baguettes were full of refined carbohydrates, and the chicken was highly processed and full of sodium. But sure, it didn't have too much fat compared to our burgers, so it was a case of being relatively healthy compared to the other options available. But if you're looking for healthy food, I would go elsewhere. I got screamed at by my 30-year-old manager, but it was so worth it. Selling huge quantities of bad food to morbidly obese people counts as unethical to me. Also, making the owners, franchisees, and all the people in head office rich seemed ethically problematic. We were also situated right next to a hospital, so people would come down in their hospital gowns and order this. Often people who would keep returning to hospital for lifestyle-induced diseases, kidney dialysis, diabetes, heart disease, etc. Story 16. Worked in a survey center for a while. All I did 8 hours a day was do surveys about political issues in various parts of the country. Lots of local stuff, but around November and December last year we got a large flood of clients that had us doing political surveys for Trump and Clinton. For 2 weeks I did nothing but lie about these candidates and bait poll people into voting for them in the primaries. 2 weeks in I couldn't do it anymore. I was lying to good, honest people who would not benefit in one single way from either of these people taking office. The day I quit, I didn't work. I walked in on time, told them I was done, and left. I wanted to call every single one of those people back and apologize for what I did. All the poor ones, the veterans, the ethnic minorities, and the ones who were struggling to get by, who all got lied to by some guy over the phone who didn't believe a word he was saying about how great these candidates were. I never once supported them, and I never will, and I regret being a tool for their greedy power grabs. Story 17. Over a decade ago, I worked briefly for a nonprofit environmental group called Clean Water Action as a canvasser. When I got hired, it sounded great. Walk around, talk to people about environmental issues, ask for donations for worthy causes. I felt like I would love it, getting the issues out there and knowing I was working for a good cause. What could go wrong? Everything. We weren't allowed to actually talk about the issues or discuss details with the public. Instead, we had broad, overgeneralized statements and ideals fed to us that we were supposed to hound people with until they gave us money. Instead of, factory farms are a big issue, not only for animal rights but for the agricultural industry as a whole. Let me tell you why. We had to say, factory farms are horrible and are run by evil corporations that torture animals. It made us look like uneducated fanatics, and it was an instant turnoff for a great deal of my hometown population, rural Midwest. When I was being trained in, the canvasser I was shadowing was in a poorer part of town, mainly low-income and community housing, and when she would come across mentally handicapped or slightly demented elderly adults, she would ditch the information altogether, just talk to them about their day, becoming friendly with them, and then walk them through getting their checkbook or credit card and making a $50 to $100 donation. I was completely floored, and her defense was saying what she did wasn't illegal. I earned the donation by taking time out of my day to make them feel like they had a friend. There was a local politician that had an office within the Clean Water Action offices, and while we were out canvassing about evil factory farms or whatever, we were supposed to also talk about him and urge people to vote for him. We even had information about him to hand out along with our pamphlets and stuff. It was weird, but I was told that as long as the organization wasn't giving his campaign money, it was legal. However, I'm pretty sure that some of the donations we took were going directly to his campaign. Everything was so strategic. We had to open our interactions by making the person we were talking to agree to 3 things we said. Only then could we move into our spiels. If the person refused us, we were supposed to leave them alone, but it was very encouraged for us to continue hounding them. Another girl I was canvassing with had gone as far as threatening individuals. Stuff like, "I'm not leaving this house or leaving you alone until you write me a check." She even had the cops called on her before. She was proud talking about it. "Yeah, most of the time people would rather just give you $10 than call the police and go through all that." Her techniques were praised by the local leaders of the organization. There was always just a general feeling like you should do anything possible to get a donation, no holds barred. It didn't matter if the person who gave you $50 was an elderly person on a fixed income with dementia who needed you to remind her 3 times while writing the check what she was doing, or if you had just threatened to harass them all night until they handed over money. Just get it. I quit very shortly after starting, the only time I've ever done so in a job. I've always heard complaints about nonprofits and charities. I wanted to believe that all the claims that the money they get doesn't go to the right place weren't true. That would be great, wouldn't it? If charities did what they said they would do and money went to places that it should, but I guess that's just too unprofitable. This thread definitely did not increase my belief in charities whatsoever. If you know of any good ones, let us know in the comments. Let's get some positivity going after all this. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or a night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.